All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the Cross Project Council bi-weekly meeting. Today is Tuesday, the 20th of August, 2024, and I will be chairing this meeting. Before we get started, for those of you who are on the call, please add your name in the doc that's shared in the chat. In terms of announcements, do we have any announcements for today?
We have a standards collaboration space meeting right after this for folks who may be watching now or later to know that we do have those bi-weekly as well. Check it out.
Thank you, Robin. Anything else that we should bring up as announcements?
Just since it's off the top of my head, and it does come up in the standards group, but also relevant for here for folks that know or have lines on any scheduling information. TC39 is we're planning meeting dates for next year. So we put out a call for any events that may conflict that we would want to avoid the dates for. And also gentle reminder to look at our dates when we publish them, because we often are planning more in advance than other folks are, and they forget to consider us when they're planning their dates, and then that leads to a conflict. So anyway, if you know of anything that we should be aware of, please let us know. Thank you.
Jory Burson also keeps a standards calendar.
Yep.
So
I raised this in the standards group as well, but it doesn't hurt to, thank you for that.
I agree, totally agree to put it out there. Yeah.
Right.
All right, cool, awesome. Thank you, Chris. And please consider each other's meetings before setting your own meetings to avoid meeting conflicts. That's better. Thank you. We have no board meeting updates because the board is the board meeting is this week. So no updates, and we had an item that was waiting on the board, but we have solved it, and we're just waiting for one final bit of info to be able to merge the pull request for the Cross Project Council COC team. We could actually make an announcement for the new COC team and the team members. I don't know that we have we? Let's make an announcement. And so let me actually find the issue where that is mentioned. So the new COC team will be comprised, as the previous one, of Robin and Kylie from the foundation, and then Benjamin Grunbaum, Chris de Almeida, who's with us today, and Paul, who's also with us today. So thank you, all five of us, for volunteering for this. What's the word? Difficult work. It was like no benefits at all. Is that the right way of putting it? I don't know. But anyway, thank you for your service. All right. Moving on from there and back to the next issues. Do we have anything in the staff updates on legal or website or anything of that matter?
I think we do.
Oh, amazing.
On the legal front, we got some guidelines about ingesting projects using CNCF as an example. So I just need to organize things there. I've been working on the CLA stuff first. So there was a request for pseudo anonymity, and we think this is not a problem. So I've requested some more information on how to adjust our current CLAs. I think what we can do is basically remove all the address stuff, which was the problematic stuff, except for country, which I'm assuming should be okay, as it's general enough. But yeah, so I think that's going to move forward, which is great. And was there another legal update I had?
Well, there's the DCO CLA stuff that kind of
Yeah,
like arguably falls in that, but we have an issue I mean, we have a I think a pull request for this that we're
yeah, we do.
discussing. Did it show up in I'm not sure if it showed up. I don't think it showed up in I don't think it was tagged with the cross project council meeting. So let's quickly discuss it here now actually. I think that makes sense. Can you pull up the number by any chance? Oh, thank you.
Yes.
So it's 1354.
Yeah.
And so it's a modification of the IP guidelines that they would help new projects and existing projects implement the IP guidelines. And it has like parts on the DCO and the CLA. I think there's some lively discussions in the pull request, which I think is great. Um, do you want to discuss those here, or are we happy continuing them async? I just quick point before we make a decision about this. I think it's very effective to essentially have someone in general as a practice to have someone. You've been doing this quite a bit, Ben, and so I kind of want to underline that this works well. It's just actually someone gets there, does something that gets shot down by everyone. And then we actually arrive at like some kind of like thing that everyone's happy about. And so no, but I think it's important to like outline that this is a practice that works well. And I think you've been taking Ben input like very gracefully, and people have been very graceful about the way they've been providing input. And so I think that works well. And like I love that we're able to do this. I just want to underline that this works well, and like we should do more of this like across the board in general. So was this sort of like high level comment made? Yeah, if people want to talk something, if people want to discuss something today that they feel warrants discussing, I think we can entirely do this. And if not, and people are happy to continue doing this asynchronously, that's fine too.
Yeah, and just from a high level, yeah, I love what Ben's been doing as well. We talked about that yesterday, getting something out there. Also Andy, who's our legal counsel, also suggested we look to, the LF legal team for best practices. They're not necessarily black and white legal practices, but if we were to have our attorney independently, participate in these, we obviously couldn't afford that. So I'd like to get to like a good place that we're all happy with on these gray areas, and then maybe get a final sign off from the board and legal.
Perfect. That sounds good. I mean, just briefly on this issue, I think on the CLA there were no comments because it was pretty straightforward. On the DCO, there was a little bit more friction because there was the one of the things that was laid out was making a bot mandatory, which I think a number of people disagree was for a different set of reasons. And I'm glad we actually have the reasons sort of like spelt out because they were informative and useful. My recommendation before Jordan, I let you speak is that the so there are two options for the DCO. One was a bot and one was out. And I think we should put a little more work in outlining the one not was a bot option to make it easier to implement. Because right now it feels kind of like, I'm not too sure what to do. And if we could get to a position where that's easier, it would be good. And I'd love to hear the downsides of that solution over the other one. Because we've heard of the downsides of the bot, and so I'd love to have like both points of view. I think that would be great. Jordan.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that like fleshing all that out is good, right? Like how-to guides and stuff. I just think that in general, we shouldn't be making specific implementations mandatory. Like, so in other words, if the requirement is like the requirement really in spirit isn't like you must have DCO or CLA. It's you must have an approved method of guaranteeing the rights, that all your contributions were like legally submitted or whatever it is, right? Like, but that's, a mouthful, and so it's simpler to say DCO or CLA, right? But so like the requirement should match the spirit, right? Which is that like, here are the approved methods of ensuring there's no legal problems. This is what you should do. If here are suggestions, but like the way you check those boxes, I think should be not mandated. So
Ben, you're muted.
Sorry. I have a different opinion from Jordan. And I do think we should provide a set of options, because we don't want each of our projects implementing a specific solution for something like this. Like, I think that there are advantages here to saying, here is the small set of solutions that we support that we can help with. I'm just imagining what would happen if we, this is similar to why we're consolidating our infrastructure, right? It's that if every project does a nuanced version of this, it becomes hard to manage. I think practically speaking, there aren't that many options for projects to go forward with, right? Like there's the bot, and like there's this other version of including the DCO in some way in pull request templates. Like I'm having trouble imagining like something divergent from either of those two that a project might reasonably do. But I think this is a scenario where like less options is better for the projects. And if we can provide guidance, I think it does make it easier.
Yeah, just briefly here, I think Jordan's point is absolutely important, right? Like there are sort of like high level policy decisions, and then there are implementations, and you want to make a distinction between both. To Ben's points, so I agree that there shouldn't be mandates in the guidelines, right? However, the guidelines are really about like outlining the most common and easiest to implement solution, and at the expense of being, having all of the options laid out, right? The whole point of the guidelines is precisely to say, hey, if you're setting up a project and want to meet the IP requirements of the foundation, here are the four things, or four things that you have to do. And then there was like at the bottom, and if there's something that you need that or that you want that's not in there, here's how to get like an exemption for this, right? So I think we have to strike some form of balance here. And that's not to say, by the way, that I have opinions about whether or not it should be or not, it shouldn't be a bot or whatnot. Like that's the second point, right? If like every project, if like the default suck, pardon my French, and then every project literally shows up and asks for an exemption, then that's entirely not the point of the whole thing, right? So we want defaults that people are happy with, and the ability to have exemptions otherwise. Michael.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, I think this is one area where, like, one of the key things for the foundation is, are we handling the IP correctly? So I'm okay with it says something like, you must follow one of the approved methods for law. The approved methods are this, this, and this. And then, yeah, it can be like, if you want to use another approved method, talk to, Ben or whatever, right? And like the DCO one is complicated enough that like getting agreement that say what we do in the node project is good enough, and then documenting that has a lot of value for other, projects to say. And I suspect like it doesn't have to say these are the only two you can do, but it's like, here's two approved ones. If you want to do something else, you can consult, but I suspect almost everybody will just pick one of those rather than trying to figure out one which on their own, right? So that's my 2 cents.
that sounds
100% in agreement. Yeah, cool. Shall we move on? Do you need help then from the Node folks to spell out more precisely what is it that they do? You're good?
I don't think so. I mean, well, I hope I understand what they do, but I'll put it in writing and then they can check. But yeah, I mean, I looked through most of the stuff that they do, and so I think I've got it. But yeah, I'll get an extra pair of eyes after I write it.
I mean, you
I'll
will.
add
It's a pull request.
I'll
Yeah,
add
exactly.
my typical ask too, like, once we do that, if there's anything that can be done to help us enforce it, that would be handy too, right? Like, I know we create a new repo. Do we always make sure that that template exists? I don't know, right? Like, so some sort of tooling that could go through and say, you're following this approach. Yeah, okay, you've got that in place would be really handy. So I'll just, while you're thinking about it, Ben, I'll throw that out there as
It sounds like you want a bot, Michael. Just saying.
a bot that checks if the template's there versus, yeah, well, you know what I
Yeah,
mean.
I know. I'm just making a joke. Yeah, totally. I get it. Yeah, and there was actually a recommendation from legal that I might suggest to the Node project that I think might improve things also. So yeah, I'll noodle with that a little bit.
Thanks.
Sounds good. Do we want to open a separate issue for how to make sure that new projects, from new repository of an existing project implement this, or do we want to put this in writing somewhere, or like, is this a different thing that we don't want to get into right now?
Let me think about it, because I know that like this will be part of the new project checklist. Like it needs to list there, right? That's the most important part. And then there's also tracking to make sure that like all of our existing projects have been with this. So let me poke around in the docs and see where this might make sense, and if we
All
need
right,
another
cool.
issue.
Perfect. I think we're good to move on. Ulysses, you also brought in a new proposal that we didn't have a chance. They didn't have a chance to actually label in time for this to show up in the list, and that would show up now. Do you want to quickly fill us in?
Yeah, is the issue that I created yesterday?
Yes,
think.
about sustainability.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So the idea basically is there is like some rising interest in some of the projects, like in Express and in Node.js, and I see maybe other projects also Mocha confirmed interest. In exploring a little bit better ways to make the project more sustainable in terms of funding and stuff like that. But seems like it might be sustainable in more wild terms, like can be including mental health, how to improve the collaboration, in how to deal with tech devs and stuff like that. So the idea of the proposal, more or less, and see if we can get some traction in the idea, is to create like a collab space, or so a dedicated space basically for having this forum, and to invite the folks there and to have discussions and to see if we can extract some of these knowledge, ideas, and experiences and propose some outcomes so other projects can benefit from that easily. So the next generation of projects who want to go this path as well, they can learn from us basically, and we can support each other. Basically, that's the idea in general terms.
Yeah, thank you for sort of like giving us the high level. Any comments on this? I mean, there's already like a lively discussion in there. People are interested. Are we happy? Are we good with making this a collab space? Does this sound fine to folks overall? Yeah, I mean, all right, cool. Yeah, I was, I mean, it sounds like there's like quite some interest, and it's like properly scoped. So I think it makes sense. I never know exactly what the process is for creating collab spaces. Does anyone know
Well,
off the top of their mind?
Well,
it's written down somewhere.
yes,
Oh
and
God. Okay, I'm not gonna go
sometimes
look for it now.
sometimes it's been a little ad hoc-y, and sometimes it's been a little more formalized. I think, I mean, Ulysses did a great job of outlining it, so I don't think we need a lot of process. I think, we can just
But
help.
it's well documented.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, I just
Probably,
got the
like,
search for it.
probably implies some pull request, adding it to the list of projects.
Yeah, and probably repo creation, stuff like that. So yeah, definitely there's like a to-do list that
Get
Yeah,
it on
this
the
repo
calendar.
right here has the template to make a request.
oh
And
good.
then,
Fancy.
yeah, and then get some founding members who want to help on your scheduling, and then we can get it on the public calendar. We can have a Slack channel, all those things.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you. So it seems like there's attraction for the idea. That's good.
I'm kind of baffled that I'm just learning about this like different repository, just like pretty much right now. Anyway, I'm glad this is not recorded. I know it is. I'm sorry. All right. Anything else on this one? Like, I guess the next steps is you look at what the next steps are, and then like file a open and pull request, or like follow whatever the next steps are. Does that make? Are we good with this? All right.
Yeah,
Cool.
that makes sense. Yeah.
All right, so moving on to the actual agenda, 1355 continuity and continuity policy, sorry, for package registries. Ben, Chris, want to give us a quick summary of the conversation here? No?
I will just say that I completely 100% agree with what Chris is proposing.
All right, so like neither of you have any idea what this is about, right?
No, yes, I remember. I remember. Chris, you want to? I mean, I'm happy to talk about it if you want, but I feel like Chris created the issue, so.
Yeah. So this actually came up when I, unrelated to the CPC directly, I learned that the TC39 had an NPM org for the few packages that it publishes, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then it made me think about this because I was like, wait, who's in the TC39 NPM org? And then and that made me think of the CPC continuity. So if you have a need for continuity of the GitHub repositories, you probably have a need for continuity of package registries. I don't know if there's any other than NPM that OpenJS Foundation projects use. But yeah, probably this is something that also needs to be incorporated into the existing continuity policy. For GitHub repos, it needs to work slightly differently, or at least you have less options. Like, I don't think you have the enterprise thing as an option. So I think that would leave, it means like Robin might need to sign up for a new account that she doesn't necessarily have today. But yeah, I think the only option would be to add somebody either to the org in NPM, but also not all packages might be published from an org directly. So in that case, you would be added directly to the project repository. That might have already been in the existing continuity. Now I want to pull it up. What were the three options? It was either add. I can't find it.
One was add explicit permissions, like add Ben or a similar user with explicit permissions. One is join the GitHub org to the enterprise, and the other is, I think, do nothing.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, and the opt out. Right. Okay. So so basically you'd have to either add.
Right. Well, so for NPM, there's no like enterprise feature the way GitHub has.
Right.
So the only option that would really make sense is adding an NPM account as an admin or an owner rather on your NPM org. And then that NPM account would have credentials that were, locked up in some vault that only like Ben and Robin could get to or something. That luckily though, that doesn't that still creates the same issues as the similar option on GitHub conceptually. But because of the way NPM is set up, you can kind of Like you wouldn't see that OpenJS account as a publisher of the packages, and they wouldn't be able to publish as them, I think, directly. Maybe they would, but like it's slightly less bad, basically, than the GitHub option for those that have those concerns. But there isn't another alternative.
Okay. This is also making me realize we might have a small gap in the existing continuity policy because option 1 is to add to the project, whereas it really should be ideally add to the org.
That's true.
Especially orgs like Express, where there's actually 3 orgs for Express, and like,
Well, the word
100
project
packages.
is frustratingly vague, right? Like the project includes every asset that the project includes, which is repo or org. So org is correct, but if the project is just a standalone repo, it would be repo, right? Like, and if it was 17 repos across 10 different orgs, it would be all that.
Yeah, it may very well just be a exercise in copywriting rather than a policy change.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. If there's one GitHub org, then that is what the intention is that they be added to that org.
Okay, so it sounds like everyone, I mean, unless there is dissenting opinion, everyone is on board with this needing to be included. And update the continuity policy, just updated, and then with, to Jordan's point, the particulars of the limitations of how NPM works to how we go about this.
Amazing. Ben, are you going to take this on?
Yeah, I mean, I love an opportunity to revisit NPM because it's been a while and their permissions and all those best practices. So yes, happy to do this.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Right, moving on, formalized result of COC team selection process. We have done this. We're just waiting to merge the pull request. We'll be able to do this shortly. So we should move to 1347, which is the COC request from Node.js for the Discord server. I didn't see if there was any changes on the issue, any updates since last time. Does anyone in the know? No? I'll guess we'll wait for Claudio to tell us in the next time they're around. All right, so no updates on this one. And then sort of like the issues following this one, which are 1346. Wait, I mixed up the issue. No, that's right. 1346, 1345, 39, 37, 36. They're all about cleaning up the repository. So I promised to update the result of our working session last week in those issues, and I haven't had a chance to do this. But I can give you sort of like the really high level outcome of our conversation, and I think it would be actually great to have the reaction of folks on the CPC about this. We had this really interesting conversation about what to do with artifacts that were no longer current, but that had a meaningful historical perspective. And after some really interesting back and forth and U-turns and lots of, like a lively and valuable conversation, we ended up deciding that what we should do was to simplify the process of keeping things current and up to date as much as possible. And what that implied was to essentially be able to go ahead and archive and delete files rather easily, knowing that we can always add them back in the future, or if there seems to be a good reason to do so. So essentially, the decision was, and it's really interesting because it really went back and forth. The decision was to focus on making sure that information is current and that it is easy to update the repository. And so we recommended against having an index or like keeping artifacts in a dedicated folder. But also entirely opened up the option for being able to add things back in the future if we felt it was valuable and necessary to do so. And I must add, one of the key sort of like way to manage that trade-off was to, if you were deleting anything from the repository, to be very explicit about what you were deleting and for what reasons in the commit message, because that would make it easy to surface, though that would make those surface in research if you were doing a search. But that was the trade-off. I'd love to hear people's comments on this, if there are any comments. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like explaining yourself in the commit message is just basic Git hygiene. So that sounds good to me.
Look, I mean, I tend to have lots of commits which go fixing the last fix or typo. So, you know, I agree with you.
And while I will withhold judgment, I agree with the guidance you suggested prior.
All right, cool. It's okay if you judge, though. It would only be fair. All right, so that makes us move all the way down to improve a minute taking of CPC calls, which I believe is 1323. I think we were waiting on the result of Ben testing some tools. Did you update us on this already?
Yeah, I updated this during the meeting, but I can just mention what I
Sorry.
put in there. Yeah, Zoom AI is supposed to be turned on or enabled for LFX managed calls by the end of the month. So we can turn that on and experiment and see how well it does. I use it on other calls and like it's pretty good. You still should take it with a grain of salt. Like it makes some mistakes with regards to people's names, but like it's actually pretty good at capturing action items, which is one of the more important things. So yeah, and it'll only get better. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with it.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. So I guess we'll revisit that one once we have this. Maybe we should remove it from the CPC calls in the meantime. The Foundation Project Health Survey, that's 1313. Any comments about this one?
I'm still muted. I think we can kind of close the loop on this one. I think like my takeaways from this one is we got to do a lot more outreach when we send out the survey via a variety of channels, like essentially all of them, more than once, because this is hard to get on people's radar. It competes with some of this is the bad word, but the only one I can think of, some of the noise that they get probably on the CPC private list. So yeah, I think that's a takeaway. The other thing is, we've got projects that we don't hear from often, right? And one suggestion that I would make to the CPC is you might think about having some annual presentation or something from these projects, just so that we know kind of like how they're doing and what's going on. Doesn't have to be super formal or anything. But like some of these projects, like I interact with like the VisGL, projects quite often because I'm helping them do stuff. But like, do you all know what's happening those projects? It's probably a mixed bag. So anyway, takeaway, something to think about is like, how does the CPC keep informed on what's going on in some of these projects?
Michael's got his hand up.
If we didn't hear from most of the projects, like, is the assumption they're not active? Like, if we did this, and shouldn't there be some follow-up that says like, well, if we can't even get a response to an email, we assume they're inactive, and what does that mean, right? Like,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I actually should have mentioned that. Then the next step here is to start going through all the folks that we haven't heard from one by one and ensure that they're still active projects. And if not, look at archiving them.
okay, good. So
Yep.
sounds like that's planned.
Yeah. I think I want to like close the survey portion and move on to the like, okay, who's still
Yeah.
with us, right? Yeah.
Totally makes sense. Yeah.
Big +1 for Ben's suggestion. I think it's great. I also like the hands off of like, doesn't need to be super formal. You don't want to be putting a burden on folks like, hey, you need to come up with a 30-minute presentation of the CPC now. So I think it's great. It's also a good way to find out if there's anything they need help with. Maybe they're dealing with some sort of issues and they're just sort of suffering in silence. So I think it'd be great to surface anything like that.
Yeah, I also probably wouldn't use this list as the barometer of who's engaged and who's not, because I think the work with Sovereign Tech Fund and the work with currently with Hero Devs, we've reached far more projects who are engaged. And we did, I had to chase them down through the channels that seem to suit them best. And we do have we have a pretty good understanding of a majority of them and whether they're active or not, but it just hasn't been formalized. But we do have a sort of our own source of truth on our infrastructure work and our partnership work. So, and it might be something, and Paula can probably pick this up too, on the ecosystem report collab space, because part of that work stream is to do more of a deep engagement with our projects.
Yeah, that was what my comment was, is, it doesn't necessarily mean the project's inactive, that they didn't respond to this, because I look at things on that list of projects that did not respond, and I'm like, oh no, these are very active. So one of the questions I had is how might we want to improve the interaction and collaboration between the foundation or the CPC and the projects, and maybe take up some, action on just how to improve that. I mean, Node-RED too is very active, I think, in Asia, Robin. So maybe there's also language and time zone. I'm not sure.
Well, we do marketing with them, and they're active in Europe as well. And yeah, we work with Nick O'Leary, but just because Nick, he's in the UK, isn't participating here, doesn't mean that we're not actively working with Nick and team. So, yeah.
Just a quick question, because I'm not sure about this. Was the survey parallel to what the collab space is doing, or was it like done together, or I'm not sure what the status of that is?
This predated the collab space.
Okay. Thank you. All right, cool. So here, I guess, well, there's a bunch of do we want to like have an open issue where we track the projects that we haven't heard from, or like how do we want to handle this?
I would move it over to the collab space, honestly, would be my recommendation, because that's getting feedback from their projects is a big chunk of that work. And the health of the projects, yeah.
Space to track health. All right, so I guess we can close this, right? Okay, archive the hospital run project, that's 1307. I think there was just like something missing for this. Ben, you're somehow
All right.
muted, but
Yeah, that's
you're
fine.
double muted. Yeah.
Double muted. Yeah. Yes, there were two things we were tracking down with Hospital Run. The first was making sure that the foundation had some admin capability to the GitHub repo, which we have. They were added to the organization, which is great. So there's one last thing remaining, which is they have an open collective account, which people can still submit money to, and there are some people that have like recurring gifts. So I am working to try and get that shut down. So once that happens, then we can officially close this out.
All right, cool. Thank you. Do you need any help with this, or like
No, I've got email threads going with a variety of people. It's just sort of like, doing the legwork. Yeah.
All right, cool. Wonderful. 1298 selection of new COC team committee members. We've just announced that earlier, so that we don't need
Chris,
to do.
Chris just raised his hand. I don't know
Oh,
if he
sorry,
has-
Chris, please.
What about their NPM packages?
Good point, Chris.
Because those
I'll
are
work on
also, those should also be marked as archive. So I guess there's the continuity aspect thing, but there's also that the packages should be marked as deprecated in NPM
Yeah.
itself, which is continuity stuff plus actual package management.
Are there? I only see one hospital run package, which doesn't appear to.
So there's
Yeah, it doesn't
hospital,
appear to be official. Hospital run CLI.
there's hospital run dash front end, for example.
Thank you.
That's
this
just
is
Okay, never
actually
mind.
a
Alright.
timely example because maybe we can use this as like something to help work out some of these issues for the overall policy.
Love that.
Well, wait,
Yeah,
but the
cool.
hospital
little-
run dash front end was published a month ago by some random person. So it's
Oh.
not clear that any of these are actually official packages.
yes, okay, so this is important. All right, so let's follow on activity.
Mhm.
But yeah, if anything needs to be dealt with on NPM, that's
Oh,
you know,
no. Yeah, there
archiving
are
and-
a couple that have like 4 downloads. But yeah, anyway, we can talk about it later.
yeah, okay. Right.
Yeah.
In term, sorry, please go ahead, Ben.
I was just going to say that the folks that I'm talking to about both Open Collective and GitHub, I'll also ask them about what's their take on NPM. So
Wonderful. I think that's useful. I think the question of like trademarks and continuity questions and also archiving stuff is important, right? And so that's also something that maybe we want to have a look at. Like what do we do in a case where there's a bunch of, we're archiving a project and we realize there's a bunch of similar, like same name projects that are still there, right? I mean, it creates a potential security concern, right? That
And yeah, this is also part of our Sovereign Tech Fund work stream, the Responsible Sunset Program. So we can document this and blog some of the best practices that the group comes up with.
all right, cool. Sounds great. We have a few more minutes before we have to go into a private session. I'm looking at what's left. Code of conduct, we've discussed this. Standardized code space of a working group, that's also part of the cleaning up thing. And the IP, I think the last one is the IP policy and license exemption request, but I think we've addressed that in the legal part, like the first part. And this is something that like Joe is working
Which one?
on
Oh,
anyway.
yeah, that's an action item for IBM.
Yeah.
Legal. So Joe was following up with them.
Yeah, so
Okay.
no update this week. Okay. Next week, working session. What on? Anything anyone wants to bring up or work on?
I think you wanted to work on the README.
I mean, we could do that. Part of the cleaning up we discussed last week was breaking down the README into something easier to I don't know, get a better sense of when you're arriving on the repository. So okay, yeah, I'm happy to continue that work next week. That makes sense. So if nothing else comes up, like we'll be working on essentially more cleanup of the repository and making it more readable, better information architecture. All right, and so I guess with this being agreed upon, we can close this meeting and go into the private session to discuss travel fund requests. Thank you everyone for attending, and we will talk in 2 weeks.